G'day, I'm Garry Stevens, and welcome to the second series of the History in the Bible podcast. More of the history in more of the books in all the Bibles. Episode 2.60, an epilogue and a prologue, my Season 2 finale. In this episode, I provide an epilogue for my second season and a prologue for my third. First, the epilogue. I do hope you have all enjoyed the second season of the podcast. I tell you, I had a hoot making it. My show relies entirely on the ideas and words of others. I do not speak Hebrew or Greek or Latin. I have never attended a course in biblical studies. I am a popularizer, not a scholar. I am a buff, someone who knows just enough to be dangerous. In a very fundamental way, I have no idea what I am talking about. I have never claimed to be objective. I made that point in the very first episode of the show in 2015. Well, it's right up there in my show description. I have doted on some scholars while ignoring others. I figure it's my show, so I may do as I please. Let me recount my sources. First, the New Testament text I have used. All the books of the New Testament were written in Greek. None reveal a Hebrew or Aramaic original. I'll pursue that further in my third season. There are two issues. What is the best Greek text that we have? And what is the best English translation of that text? The first question is easily answered. The opinion of Catholic and most Protestant churches is that the go-to text is a compendium called the Novum Testamentum Graeci. It was first compiled in the early 20th century by the German scholars Eberhard Nessler and his son Erwin. Why they decided to give a book of Greek writings a Latin name is beyond me. In the 1950s, the German theologian Kurt Aland became the chief editor. No one actually uses that unlovely Latin name. Even the most pompous of scholars refer to this work as Nessler-Aland, or simply NA. As more and more Greek manuscripts have been unearthed over the past century, the NA has adapted and evolved. This majestic creation is now in its 28th edition. The NA is an eclectic and a critical text. By eclectic, I mean that the publishing committee picks and chooses from all the many Greek manuscripts that we have to assemble what it believes to be the readings closest to the original intent of the authors. By critical, I mean that verse by verse, Nessler-Aland cites all the hundreds of thousands of variants in our manuscripts, down to the level of differences in spelling. Why should we accept the decisions of some international institute on what is the best Greek text? There are quite a few people who say we should not. The Orthodox churches regard Nessler-Aland with disdain, derision and dismay. I discussed their objections in episode 2.24, Battle for the New Testament, Part 4, Modern Times. Yet the NA is the Greek text underlying every single English translation of the Greek New Testament made since the King James Bible 400 years ago. The Revised Version, the Revised Standard Version, the New Revised Standard Version, the American Standard Version, the New International Version, the New Living Translation, the English Standard Version, the New American Bible, and even the New World Translation of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So the second question becomes, what is the best English translation of Nessler-Aland? Now, that's a matter for personal preference, really. I chose the New Revised Standard Version English translation. This translation was published in 1990 by the Ecumenical American National Council of Churches. Their brief was to produce a translation from the Greek as literal as possible, as free as necessary. The NRSV, as it's called, is widely used by Anglicans, Presbyterians, Methodists and Lutherans. Catholics regard it warily, although they have to admit it is fine for private study. Evangelical Protestants hold it to be dangerously Bolshevik. Maybe all those passages about caring for the poor puts them off. The NRSV is also the translation most often used by professors when they have to accommodate us plebs by quoting the New Testament in English. In my show, I have often compared the New Revised Standard Version to other English translations, where they are significantly different. For a grand example of that, hearken back to episode 2.53, Paul's Lost and First Missions. My main living sources for my second season were three. First, Professor Dale Martin, recently retired from Yale University. Dale, I love your lectures. Next, Professor Mark Goodacre from Duke University. Finally, Professor Bart Ehrman of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Both Mark and Bart have extensive websites and podcasts well worth visiting. My mainstays were the Oxford Encyclopedia of the Books of the Bible and the Jewish Annotated New Testament. I used countless other papers and books, long ago incorporated into my notes without memory or attribution. You can find a decent living biography of books, websites and podcasts at my own website, www.historyinthebible.com. My site also has extensive maps, charts, timelines and diagrams. And so ends Season 2 of the History in the Bible podcast. I hope you have enjoyed it. But wait! And now for the prologue to my third and final season. My third season will cover the century after the death of Paul to about the year 160. But it's not all about the Christians. I will explore the co-evolution of the children of Second Temple Judaism, the Rabbinic faith and Christianity. This season is an extended denouement to the 134 published episodes of the first 2 seasons of the show. I thought about changing the title to something like History After the Bible, but why confuse things? And after all, I still have some books in the Bible yet to cover. 2 Peter, the letters of John, the letter to the Hebrews, and Revelation. And a whole bunch of books that many early Christian communities felt should be in the Bible. The Gospel of the Hebrews, the Gospel of Peter, the Didache, the Shepherd of Hermas, the Epistle of Barnabas, the letters of Clement, and the letters of Ignatius. Modern scholars believe that all these books were written sometime during the period of my third season. They were penned by second and third generation Christians. Some of the books snuck into the New Testament, masquerading as works by the apostles. The letters of John and Peter are prime examples. Others were eventually rejected, but not without decades of debate. At Paul's death, the Jesus movement was a scattered collection of small clubs, founded by travelling charismatic preachers. Communication was erratic. The clubs wrote to their founding teachers, and these teachers responded. Most of their problems were parochial. What should we do about Demas, the adulterer? A few of the problems were theological. Is Jesus returning in glory next month or next year? Surely very soon, though. The clubs all regarded themselves as somehow connected to the Jewish religion. They could not agree on what this connection was. Even Paul was uncertain. Paul's letters show that he struggled to make it clear even to himself. Converts from Judaism still thought of the temple as the centre of their religious world. Gentile converts knew nothing of the temple. If the Jesus clubs of Paul and the other preachers had any sacred scriptures, they were those of the Jews, the Tanakh. I doubt that the Gentile members of the clubs knew much about these books. All they saw was the good news proclaimed by the preachers, a teaching fashioned by a Jewish man from the tiny province of Judea. Paul invented a weekly bread and wine celebration for his clubs, celebrated on the Jewish Sabbath. We don't know what rituals the other clubs had. We do know that they listened to letters from their founders. We don't know if any of the clubs said prayers or sang hymns or heard sermons. Now move forward a century, to the year 160 and the end of my third season. The situation had changed out of all recognition. By then, Christians had constructed an imperial organisation. The isolated clubs had networked into an international franchise, the Church. This franchise constructed layers of administration, deacons, presbyters, bishops. The churches talked to each other through their bishops, not through their individual founders, now long dead. As a burgeoning imperial organisation, the church found itself with imperial problems. Gone were the days when the biggest problem a club had was whether crescents should be expelled for eating all the spanakopita every damn week. The churches found themselves subject to the unwelcome gaze of the authorities. The emperors chose to regard Christianity as a dangerous new superstition and cult. The Romans always esteemed Judaism as a bona fide religion, one just as worthy of respect as many other religions in the empire. Christians were never granted that privilege. Their best and brightest composed elegant public defences to persuade the emperors that they were harmless. While the Christian body corporate was grappling with this challenge, the individual churches invented liturgies and rituals. Little manuals of worship, such as the Didache, began to circulate. Most churches by now were performing a weekly celebration on the Lord's Day, now moved to a Sunday. Many were starting to assemble their own prized books, books unknown to the Jews. Centuries would pass before all the churches came to agree about those books. I am fascinated by this age. Part of the allure is its obscurity. We really know so little. The century after Paul is full of shadowy, half-remembered characters, such as Bishop Clement of Rome, Ignatius the Martyr, the mysterious Papias, Aristides and Quadratus, who tried to explain their faith to pagans, and the beloved Bishop Polycarp. Only at the end of my period do we find two individuals who are more than just phantoms. Justin Martyr, defender of the faith, and Irenaeus the heresy hunter. They both flourished around the year 160, when the Roman Empire was a realm of peace, tranquility, and prosperity. And those are the two who will bookend my third season. The age of the apostles was well and truly over. Many had debated about whether the letters of Clement or Ignatius or Polycarp should be sacred canon. No one ever thought that of the writings of Justin or Irenaeus. The age was one of tumult for both Christianity and Judaism. Just a few years after the deaths of Peter and Paul, the Judeans revolted against their Roman overlords. That went as well as you might expect, and ended with the destruction of the Jewish temple in the year 70. This was a social and intellectual supernova. The power of the temple political hierarchy was broken forever. The Levites were lost to history. The Sadducees disappeared as a party and a force. The Essenes just vanished. A generation or two later, towards the end of my period, in the year 135, the Judeans again rose up in revolt against Rome. They were crushed. The entire city of Jerusalem was razed. The province of Judea was depopulated. The thriving Jewish communities throughout the eastern Mediterranean were suppressed. Under Roman rule, the Jews had enjoyed special protections and privileges, especially in their homeland. After this final revolt, Jews for the first time became a suspect and suspicious minority, forbidden to enter the city of David. Both Judaism and the tiny sect of the Christians were sent spinning off into the void. Since Solomon's day, the pivot of power and symbolic seat of Judaism was the temple, with its social structures of priests and mandated sacrifices. To Jews throughout the empire, all religious roads led to Jerusalem. The religion whose very heart and soul was the temple had to reinvent itself or die. The Jesus clubs were equally stricken. Jesus, his disciples, and Paul had all been good Jews, sacrificing at the temple. What were the clubs to do with the temple gone? Jesus and Paul and Revelation had taught that the end was near, any day now. As the decades dragged on, that became difficult to believe. In the century after the deaths of Peter and Paul, the clubs had to work out exactly what they believed. Different Christian communities constructed diverse answers to difficult questions. All claimed to advocate the true teachings of Jesus and the apostles. Some argued that Jesus was a Jewish prophet, like John the Baptist, come to turn Jews back to the path of righteousness. Others believed him to be a divine angel sent by God. There were Christians who believed that there was not just one God, but several. Many thought that the Jewish God did not create the world. Some insisted that the Jewish scriptures must be read as allegories. Others said that the Jewish scriptures were nonsense and irrelevant to Christians. The Christians were the first to reassemble the whirling fragments of the old Judaism into a temple religion without a temple. They swiped wholesale from the Old Testament the genres of historical narratives and apocalyptic fables. Their new books looked a lot like the old books of the Jews. With the Christian imperial movement stealing all its ancient methods of expression and motifs, the emerging rabbinic movement had to choose a new path. Its challenge was to reinvent Judaism, while protesting that its innovations were not novelties at all. And this will be the great theme of my third season, how both Christians and Jews reconstructed themselves after the fall of the temple. The third season will be short. I really don't know. Maybe somewhere 6 to 10 episodes. I have been researching material for a year and more, and still have much work to do before I write a single script. And I haven't decided what I want to actually discuss. Well, not entirely. But nonetheless, I expect the season to kick off in early 2021. While we are all waiting, in the coming months, I will release a few bonus episodes at irregular intervals. So, don't give up on me yet. See you soon. Thank you so much for listening all these years, and stay safe. Thanks for listening. For maps, charts, and diagrams, check out my website www.historyinthebible.com.